Thoughts from my annual visit to the Big House, next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Gets caught.
They said you can't be Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and in. Touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue. Greetings. I'm Steve Dace. Thank you for being patient on the road for work this week. Nevertheless, had to bring you another episode of Michigan Podcast after being back home in Ann Arbor to see our beloved Michigan Wolverines in person take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I've got some in-person impressions I want to share with you here on this week's episode to lead things off. So let's get it going with some of the thoughts that I had. Number one, this whole game changed when Alex Orji somehow missed Donovan Edwards wide the bleep open down the seam for an easy touchdown. If Orji makes that play, or maybe even throws it to Colston Loveland that he did throw it to earlier than he did, and that play resulted in an interception. But if he makes that play, the game is 31-3, and Michigan is coasting from there, and we're having an entirely different conversation. That's the margins you're dealing with here when you're questionable at quarterback. It's one play here, a throw there. Which brings me to number two. That play was reminiscent of Arkansas State when Davis Warren threw that pick right before half when Michigan was already up 21-3 and never recovered its momentum fully after that. And then number three, can someone explain to me why we didn't run on that 1 3rd down for Kurt Campbell to run more clock before the final field goal? Made no sense to me. Now, I don't have a bunch of complaints about Kurt Campbell here, by the way. You're trying to develop a quarterback who's not really one because you don't really have one on the roster. So I'm going to give the guy a break. But that play call, I didn't understand at all. All right, 4. I was pleasantly surprised how much the coaches did try new things, like dropping Orji back more often. And putting Khalil Mullings and Donovan on the field together. We saw a lot of that. I think we're going to see a lot more moving forward. Especially was pleasantly surprised given the messy weather. If you weren't there, it just consistently rained and drizzled consistently throughout the afternoon. You were just never dry at all. So it does show, if you're going to do it in those conditions, it does show they are attempting to expand the playbook to their credit. Now, like I've said the last 2 years as well, when you're there in person, you can see on the all 22 on every play, there's not a lot of wide open Wolverines downfield. There's not. I said this the last couple of years after being there in person. There's just something about our route tree, whether it's Roman Wilson, who's a top 100 NFL draft pick, or Ronnie Bell's little brother, who's a largely unproven no-star prospect. We just don't scheme guys open really quick in our offense. There's not a lot of guys wide open downfield that Orji is missing. That being said, there were at least 2 other plays that guys were open for first downs and big plays besides that Donovan miss that would have changed the complexion of the game. And it's not like you're asking a lot of Orji to see those things. He absolutely should. He absolutely must. And again, when you're dealing with our quarterback situation, one play here or there is the margin between we're all happy and watching the scrubs and, oh my gosh, the sky is falling and we're not winning another game. Okay. And that brings me to point 7 here, that attention to detail. This is the thing that really shows up when you see him in person and watch on TV, both. E.g., 30 yards of defensive penalties to give up a cheap touchdown that gave the Gophers confidence, the botched snap late, etc. Those things continue to be an issue. That's youth, both in the roster and in the coaching staff and experience as well. But here's the thing I do like. I did like how the offense responded with that field goal drive to make it a 2-score game again down the stretch in the first quarter or the fourth quarter. That's good culture again. And that kind of brings me to this final thought here, that much of our championship DNA of the last few years is still there. We still play a physical, complementary style of football. We just don't have third and JJ anymore. And that was a big factor. In some respects, we're running the ball better this year than we did last year. And but we are also making the sloppy mental errors that those teams, especially last year's team, simply did not. So how much of that is personnel, youth within the personnel? How much of that is an experience within the coaching staff? And of course, the answer to that question is yes. Now, before we go to Mark Rodgers, I want to address the quarterback situation here. Okay. The Jack Tuttle stuff. Stop, please. In the name of Bo and all that is maize and blue holy, stop. All Jack Tuttle has shown in 7 years of college football at 3 schools is a propensity to get injured. He has shown nothing else. He missed all of spring and most of fall camp. Stop with the questions, the call-ins questions on all the podcasts I listen to, the message board questions on all the message boards I frequent. It's like Jack Tuttle has become like a fetish. All right. I mean, go back to asking questions about Reggie Benton. If you don't remember who that is, you're just not as old as me. Kelly Baraka. I'd rather get Kelly Baraka questions than Jack Tuttle questions. Stop it. And on Davis Warren, great kid, great story. Should never have played a down of significant football at the University of Michigan. Just any other school that started a guy who was a walk-on and had like 5 games in high school football and was barely a MAC level recruit, we'd have laughed at them and been right to. Okay. The guy was just a turnover waiting to happen. And it wasn't even just the amount of interceptions, but the turnover-worthy plays that he got away with. You're turning the ball over 1 out of every 4 possessions. Stop. This is the team. The mistake here is that they didn't go to Orji from the outset. And give him games against Arkansas State and Fresno State to build some confidence. Instead, they made a mistake, okay, and wasted a quarter of the season with Davis Warren that was never going to work. Going back to him will not work. Will not work. It's all the same limits of the offense without the running element. That won't work. The goal is actually to have to go more into accepting Orji as quarterback. There needs to be more designed runs, not just scrambles or him escaping the pocket to avoid a sack. There needs to be quarterback counters, quarterback powers. We need to be running more of the plays we ran when Orji was a gadget player. We need to be running more of those. Now, I get it because of what I just said and who's behind him. Well, Steve, what about Jaden Davis? Jaden Davis is a fringe top 100 recruit. And traditionally, those guys are nowhere near being ready to play. And I listened to a podcast with Sam Webb a couple weeks ago. He made it very clear the family doesn't want him to play until he's ready. They don't want him just thrown in there as a necessity. They don't want that. Okay. So this is the team. What we have on the field is the team. And the mistake that was made is not playing Orji now, but not playing Orji from the beginning. So they need to lean more into that moving forward. And what needs to stop is the fetishizing of Jack Tuttle and Davis Warren. And this has been your public service announcement. All right, time now for the 10-minute war, and let's get Mark Rogers' take on Michigan going 2-0 in the Big Ten. The Wolverines, by the way, if you count Big Ten championship games, have won 27 consecutive Big Ten games. What an incredible run. But it just kind of feels to me like it's on the brink of being snapped, given some of the things that I saw last week in person. Some things I liked, some things I did not. Mark, you've had a chance, like the audience, to hear what I've had to say. Let me turn it over to you with your thoughts on where the Wolverines are heading into this game, which the whole complexion of the season, I think, rests on this game. If Michigan finds a way to win and goes into the bye week at 5-1, they'll be in the top 10 coming out of the bye week. They've got 2 weeks there to figure out exactly what to do to take that offense to another level with Alex Orji. If you lose, you go 4-2, you may drop out of the AP poll altogether. There's going to be a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of angst. So I think this is maybe the swing point of the season, this game. Either Michigan wins it and is somewhat a factor, at least in the Big Ten race all the way through, or loses it and, Michigan fans are deciding whether they want to watch the Music City Bowl or not.
Well, I do know that going back to the off season, that this was that trip that you were really looking at, not necessarily looking forward to, but looking forward to finding out about this football team, but also not necessarily looking forward to what you were projecting to be the result of this trip to Seattle. Going back to the Minnesota game, this was playing out in the first half as I made Michigan a confidence pick to cover the 9 or 10 points, and they were making me look good at that point, but then they let down. So first and foremost, just to get this out of the way concerning the officiating, I wish these officials would just stay out of the way, do your job, still call the game, still call the decisive calls that need to be made to impact the game, but please stay out of the way of the players deciding the game. I just thought that was an awful call at the end of the game. I know that it might have been technically the right call to make, but I think with a little discretion, you allow the players to decide the game. All right, on to the Minnesota game. This Minnesota team coming into the Big House gave us no indication that they were anything close to the Minnesota teams that won 11 and then 9 games consecutively, that this is a fairly bad football team that was dominated by Iowa, much more so than what the score would indicate from the second quarter on against the Hawkeyes. At one point in that game I'm watching, and the second quarter on yardage total was something like 220 to 15. The time that Max Brosmer had when Minnesota changed its offensive approach there, because they had to, because the score dictated, and also PJ Fleck talked about this post-game, that they wanted to go up tempo. First of all, he had nothing but gushing, glowing praise of Wink Martindale. And so I do think that there are pluses and minuses that we're seeing come out of the Wink Martindale approach. One would be maybe because of what we've seen from NFL defensive approaches in the past, that it takes the players some time to get up to speed, and then sometimes the coordinators don't have the wisdom to know that they can't implement an NFL scheme to the degree that they want to or would like with college players. So I think we're seeing some benefit and payoff to Wink Martindale being technically as good as he is, but maybe it's taken this Michigan defensive team some time to grasp this system. But also now on the counterpunch point, we're going to see Jed Fish and a Washington offense maybe really look into what Minnesota was able to accomplish on those 2 drives in the second half to get back in the ball game. And Jed Fish and Washington, Will Rogers having, a decidedly better array of skill players to deal with the Michigan defense, that they might be able to pick up some things and make it difficult on the Maize and Blue. So one was my initial takeaway of just the Wink Martindale defense, that it's not one narrative or the other, that it's all positive, all that he's a genius, nor is it that he doesn't know what he's talking about, or that it's too difficult for these Michigan players and there's no way that they can be anything close to what they were last year. I think we're seeing both there. We're seeing them play extremely dominant football. against the run, they were exceptional against Minnesota. And we know PJ Fleck's teams pride themselves on offensive line, lean, and running the football. And Darius Taylor's an excellent back, in Michigan put the clamps on that. But when they had a nice little lead, they let it get away because of one special teams play and 2 75-yard drives. So I think that Jed Fish and Will Rogers will be studying their film, and they're more capable than this Minnesota personnel contingent to do some damage.
Yeah, on the Wink side, we saw this with Mike McDonald as well. It really wasn't until the very end of the year that he mastered playing against tempo. I mean, that was a constant struggle. It took him almost the entire season to grasp that this is not the NFL. You're not going to get to substitute guys in and out regardless of the formation or the tempo that the offense is going with. Michigan State caught us in tempo so many times, and that was the one regular season game that we lost, for example. And then after that, he finally kind of started to figure it out a little bit. I do think there is something to that being an adjustment for NFL coaches. But Wink also, has gone up against arguably the 2 greatest offensive minds that are head coaches in college football today, and Steve Sarkisian and Lincoln Riley, and so, Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald, those guys are great. I mean, Mike McDonald saved Jimmy's job. No way to understate that. And I told you that season, remember, the wrong Michigan assistant was nominated for the Broyles Award. Okay. Minter was a machine. Now, he also had an NFL, his second string defense last year. Most of those guys are in NFL camps right now or will be a year from now. That was the second string defense. So his roster was loaded. Wink doesn't have that kind of depth. The top line guys are as good as anybody is in defense in college football, but the top line guys are not, that depth is not as good. And he had to right out of the gate face Lincoln Riley and Steve Sarkisian. And you could just see against USC, he learned some things. They tried to stretch us horizontally and find holes. It didn't work as well. And that's the first time in Lincoln Riley's career he's opened a game punting on his first 4 possessions. Never happened, ever. When he was East Carolina, Oklahoma as an OC, Oklahoma as a coach, USC as a coach. Never had to start a game 4 straight punts before. I don't have any issues with Wink. I mean, he got 2 stops on USC at the end of the game with Will Johnson not on the field. All right. I mean, I've got no issues where that is concerned. And Michigan, if you watch the game, Michigan played a lot of guys on defense. They're trying to get that second layer of player ready so that they don't have to play Mason Graham 60 snaps against Minnesota before we even get to Oregon and Ohio State. And I think that's a factor in why you're seeing them give up some of these cheesy points at the end of these games to Arkansas State and then also to Minnesota here. The bigger, I don't even really have a problem. I know there's been a lot of complaining about Kirk Campbell's offense. I mean, I don't know why they threw the ball there at the end of the game and then just run and kick a field goal and run out the clock, basically, But again, from the outset, even despite the weather, it was very clear that they wanted to put more on tape with Alex Orji at least being given permission to throw the football before they get into this next layer of Big Ten games, and they're trying to do that. And I don't think you can assume that Kirk Campbell's a genius because he quarterback coached a top 10 pick in the draft. Okay. He inherited J.J. McCarthy, didn't recruit him. He inherited him. Didn't really develop him either. He inherited him. But I also don't think you can judge him very harshly off the fact we don't have a quarterback right now. We just don't. Davis Warren should have never played a significant snap of football for the University of Michigan. If you're a quarterback and you're no threat with your legs and the offense turns it over 1 out of every 4 possessions, that's why you were a MAC-level recruit and a walk-on, and that's what you should expect from a MAC-level recruit and a walk-on. For every Baker Mayfield story, the other 99.9999% of these guys looks like Davis Warren looked. All right. Jaden Denigall's not any good, and Jaden Davis is not ready. So he was a fringe top 100 recruit, and most of those guys aren't ready to be a starting quarterback coming right out of high school. So we're left with an elite athlete who's not a quarterback, and we got to figure out how to get enough out of him so you don't just completely derail a season when you still have All-Americans littered throughout your roster like Loveland, Graham, Will Johnson, and guys like Josiah Stewart we weren't even talking about that are playing like All-Americans right now. And that's what the coaches have to figure out. And I think that's why this game is so very important. If Michigan can find a way to win, Mark, and it doesn't matter, man, if it's freaking Penn State, Iowa 2002, 3-2. or whatever the hell year that was. It doesn't matter. If they can find a way to win this game and get to 5-1 by any means necessary into the bye week, that will buy them some time to make up for the mistake they made from the outset. They should have just gone with Orgy from the outset, and they'd be 3 games ahead of his development right now. Likely the result against Texas is the exact same, but he gets some more opportunities against Fresno State and Arkansas State to develop, and they messed up. All right. If they get to this bye week, though, with the win, then they can those 2 weeks can make up for those 3 weeks that they messed up, right, and get them ready for the rest of the year. If we lose, I can just tell you how the Michigan fan base operates. All right. I'm a little stunned. Maybe I shouldn't be. That more people are not. We won the Natty like me. I really don't care, Mark, if they're 4-8 or 8-4. Frankly, if you're not going to make the playoff, you might as well be 4-8. The bowl games mean even less than they meant before, and no one's going to care. But people are already in meltdown mode, like they didn't just watch a national championship 7 months ago. So maybe not only are we better than the Buckeyes as a program right now, maybe we're becoming more like Buckeye fans. Just it doesn't matter how good the season was before. We're just beyond obsessed every year. So you guys maybe won that argument with us too, okay? Because I'm not there. I really don't care what their record is. I just hope everybody is healthy and has a good time. You know, we won the Natty. I'm good. All right. But the fan base and the alumni base is in a meltdown over what they're seeing on offense right now. If we lose this game, I mean, the whole Michigan message boards are basically hymnals to Davis frickin' Warren. Okay. And I mean, like, I didn't realize there were this many members of the Davis Warren family that had accounts on all these Michigan websites. But apparently they're that big of a family. All right. The 2 weeks that they will have to try to develop him, the pressure from the outside will be extraordinary. And I think risks the rest of the season. And that's why I think this game is a major inflection point for the rest of the year for Michigan. And therefore, maybe for Sharon Moore as a coach, Mark, because we're in an era now, if you're coaching at a Michigan or Ohio State in basketball, you'll never be permitted to go 3 years in a row and not make the NCAA tournament. You'll be gone. Okay. And in football, you'll never be permitted to go 3 years in a row and not make the playoff. You'll be gone. Okay. So if they don't make the playoff this year, next year is way more of a rebuilding year. Although I'm told by people who would know that we're going to have a budget to compete with you guys next year. All right. So hopefully that's the case, because they got a lot of work to do. They're going to have to really rebuild the roster for next year. So they're going to need all the money they can get. But if you don't make it your first 2 years, you're on the hot seat list of every magazine heading into year 3, and you'll be gone if you go 0 for 3. You know, and so this is a major inflection point, I think, not just for this season, but for the Sharon Moore era, is to figure out some way to get the hell out of Seattle, Washington, where better Michigan football teams than this one have gone and lost, okay, to figure out how to get the hell out of there with a win by any means necessary, to buy yourself some time to develop Alex Orgy and make up for the mistake you made at the start of the year, wasting a third of the season, if you're counting camp, on Davis Warren.
Steve, how many of these segments have we done at this point? 50, 100, something like that? I should know better. So I have finally learned that when you open your mouth, I got to start writing things down, because I'll never remember all the things I want to respond to. I finally learned that today. So I will start with this. First of all, Washington's a pretty good football team. They're not fighting for a Big Ten championship, but they've played enough significant opponents, Washington State, Rutgers, forgetting the other one off the top of my head. Somebody else was decent that they played. Northwestern, I guess, but the other two, that I think we've got a pretty good gauge on what Washington is. Washington they're a 6-6 football team. They're a mid-level. They are the mid-level of the Big Ten. So it's certainly capable of being a loss, because I'll go to two things. One that you addressed last week that turned out to be true. One that I addressed last week as a projection toward the rest of the season that already gave us indication that it's true. Yours is that what they need to do with Alex Orgy is to just slowly give him 1 or 2 more throws, progressions to go through, and build his game. Now, it certainly wasn't pretty this past week against Minnesota, but that's a strong indication of what they did. You know, he was actually lauded for a couple progressions he actually made, and one big one that he didn't, of course, in which he missed a wide open Donovan Edwards and went to Colston Loveland, still could have gotten the ball to him. Even when he was dropped back in the pocket with all that time, the interception he threw with Loveland going down the seam, I was like, throw it, throw it, throw it. And then he finally let it loose way too late and way far toward the middle of the field and missed what the pattern was calling for and what the coverage was calling for, actually. So, but at least they're following your pattern in regards to this is the only way that they can get some kind of functional passing attack maybe in the next 4 or 5 weeks is to work with Orji a little bit each and every week. The point that I made last week was the positive of what we saw against USC also has a negative. And the positive is you can play, you can walk that tightrope, and you can pull your resources, defense and running game, to your advantage and limit the passing attack and take us back to 1975 and punch up. But you can also punch down or allow a Minnesota to stay in the game as they did this week. So we already got an indication of both of those going forward. I will say that the thing about Davis Warren, and I generally agree with you, that they should have gone to Alex Orji. He is such a better runner that they could lean on a positive skill set as opposed to somebody that's going to throw the ball a little bit better, but obviously is a turnover machine. That's based on, though, could they evaluate those turnovers, those interceptions, those missed throws by Davis Warren, and what the impetus of them are? Were they misreads? Were that what were the cause there, and can they coach that out of him? Because there's plenty of guys that have thrown interceptions at times because of inexperience, but they're smart guys and they learn. I don't have the answer to that question, and they may not have enough football games to determine that. So you go with Orji and you change the offense and you change the run-pass ratio. Also remembering, Steve, that you gave me, correct me if I'm wrong, the option of whether it was more likely that this team be 5-1 after 6 games or 3-3. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I said 5-1.
Yeah, you did.
They're going to be 5-1. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be close, but they're going to be 5-1. And then what else do? It just hurts me to say that you don't care if you're 4-8 or 8-4. Even for as much as I would love Michigan to be 4-8, and I know these bowl games don't mean anything. They don't mean anything unless your rival is losing them. Because when Ohio State lost to Missouri, that suddenly became the second most important season game played.
I'm well aware of that, and it works both ways. You're right. Other than the troll factor on X Twitter, fan base, Wolverine, Big D energy versus Pet Buckeye, sack dispenser. Okay, trolling each other. The reality is, every year, if you're not in the playoff, you're basically 4-8, 3-9. Okay, if you're not ranked in, if you're a power conference team and you're not in the top 11, you're unranked. It doesn't matter if we sit around arguing, am I 12th, am I 23rd? It doesn't matter. If you're not in the top 11, you're unranked. If you're not in the playoff, your season failed. Period. That's the era in which we are now in, and so I don't really care at that point. So I guess that's just one more day of, I guess, if Michigan's in the Music City Bowl, will I watch? Sure, I'm already off that time of year, and I'll probably watch the Music City Bowl no matter who's in it because I'm off that time of year. Will I care? Not one friggin' flippin' iota. Well, I care. It's basically a spring game against another team, and that's the way you look at it. And that's now where we are. It's playoff or bust every single year, Mark.
You're right about that. You are right from a rational standpoint, but there's still a small part of me that goes back to my childhood when it mattered to me, when Ohio State was ranked number 9, and I believed that they should have been number 7.
I know. Those were the days, brother. I know. Those were better arguments over the ones we're having now. I agree with that. Good to see you, man. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
You bet. All right, this week's X poll result. We asked you, does Michigan win its first road game of the season and the rematch of last year's national title game at Washington? 67% of you said yes. 33% of you said no. I would be on the no. I did not vote yes. So I'm not sure whose vote that is, but it is not mine. That brings us to our feedback of the week. I can't read that. Why can't I read that? What does that say, Aaron? I forgot.
Michigan man and one of my favorite podcasters. Also, I was the one who voted yes because I grabbed that screenshot from my account. Hello,
so
everyone.
You're the guilty part. That was the most perturbed hello I've ever heard in my life. Hello, everyone. That was great. Oh, my gosh.
Thank you, Natty Lou Blue, on behalf of Steve. That's a very nice compliment.
Oh, gosh.
Our Skype connection is about the quality of a potato, so that's why Steve can't read this.
Oh, Natty Blue, thank you. And I was rocking, yes, that's the official replica Michigan Rose Bowl jersey there, including the gaudy Rose Bowl patch on the shoulders. I was the only one I saw at Michigan Stadium that had that jersey, and I'm very proud of it. So, because you guys don't want to know how many Homeland Security laws I had to violate to get that jersey. So, thank you to Natty Lou Blue for the kind thoughts. Thank you to Aaron for the extremely unkind hello, everyone. And thank you to Skype for its crappy connection. That'll wrap it up for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whichever you do, however you prefer to connect with us. And we would love it if you do those things because it also helps us to connect with even more Michigan fans just like you. Don't forget to follow us as well on X, especially on game days, at Michigan Podcast there on Twitter/X, at Michigan Podcast there. That'll do it for this week's episode. I'll be back in normal studio settings next week, hopefully with a better connection than this. Nevertheless, thanks for tuning in, and don't forget, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.